On its initial release on the PTS, Poison Star seemed like the ideal item. It had physical power, critical strike chance, a slow and damage reduction to the enemy, all with a very low price tag of just 2000 gold. It seemed like this crit item would take the place of the first crit item in a standard hunter build and would be efficient on a variety of characters that benefit from crit in some way or another. Since its release on the live servers, the item actually hasn't been picked up nearly as much as most people were expecting, who thought the item was broken. To some extent, I made the same mistake. I thought the item would be very strong. However, what's important to point out is that the item actually saw multiple nerfs before it hit live that were kinda done underhanded and last minute and didn't really become all too popular until people noticed that the item didn't get picked up. So what changed between the PTS version and the live version? First of all, Poison Star now costs 2200 gold, so 200 more gold than it originally did. That doesn't sound like a major difference, but it's not completely insignificant either. It is especially important when you compare it to other crit items, namely Wind Demon, which is also among the cheaper crit ones. It also brings it a lot closer to Rage price-wise, which sits at 2400 gold. Additionally, and this change is a lot more crucial, the duration was nerfed. Originally, Poison Star lasted for 3 seconds, now it only lasts for 2. I did not expect these changes to come out last second as they did. I waited very long with my first video on this topic, so I was relatively sure that at that point there would be no changes to the item anymore before it hits live. And the original version of Poison Star would have probably been very strong. Now, the item isn't quite as impactful because it is more expensive, making it closer to normal crit items, and at the same time, the duration of the effect is shorter. This is very impactful, and I cannot stress this enough. If you put this item in a direct comparison with Wind Demon now, it actually kind of falls flat. Wind Demon's passive lasts for 5 seconds. It gives you 20% movement speed, which is basically the reverse of the Poison Star slow. And at the same time, it gives you 20% attack speed. What does this mean? 20% attack speed may not quite translate into 20% extra damage. It depends on the rest of your stats, but it's a decent damage boost. So that value kind of compares to the damage reduction of Poison Star. At the same time, 20% movement speed is slightly less valuable in the regard that it only works on yourself, but it's also slightly more valuable because it helps you juke the enemy better, and it is less problematic when it procs. Now, why would a slow proccing on the enemy be problematic for a hunter? This is because this is not a reliable slow. The slow only procs when you crit, different from a Frostbound Hammer where you know as soon as you hit the target, it is slowed. This means that if the crit happens at the wrong time and you're trying to predict a basic attack, depending on where the enemy is currently walking, you may actually end up missing your shot because your last hit connected, crit the target, you're already lining up your next shot, and all of a sudden your target is slowed, so they're not gonna be where you try to estimate them to be. So that's more of a downside, whereas if you get movement speed yourself, your aim will typically not change. Instead, you will just be able to weave around faster. This means that just comparing the passives, Wind Demon comes out on top. Additionally, you get the other stats on the item. Wind Demon has that extra 5% crit, which can be crucial, even though it doesn't feel like all that much. It can still be that little extra chance that you need. And it also has the extra 10 power, meaning all your abilities also deal more damage. There's a reason why Wind Demon is often preferred over Rage, and this is part of it. Also, keep in mind that there is a less awkward price curve. Whereas Poison Star goes from 900 to 600 to 700 gold, so the first part is actually the most expensive one, Wind Demon has that price curve where you dropped out with a more expensive item at the end, and it makes sense to back around that time. You hardly ever back for 700 gold items. You usually back around 1,400, 1,500 gold, and that's a very good time to buy Wind Demon if you have the other two parts already. This is just a minor detail, but all of this plays into Wind Demon just being an overall more efficient item than Poison Star, despite of being slightly more expensive. You get slightly better stats for a slightly higher price tag, along with a much better passive, mostly because the duration is more than twice as long now. For this very reason, I would not pick Poison Star over Wind Demon if I'm looking for a first crit item. After that, for maximum DPS, Deathbringer is always the best choice, and you want to have that extra damage. That basically only leaves Poison Star the third slot, because the only slot where Poison Star really makes sense is one where you can reliably make sure that you will crit every 2 seconds or less in order to constantly keep the passive up. And that can only happen when you have a really high crit chance or high attack speed, or ideally both, which is very, very late into the build. So all of this very much speaks against building Poison Star as a first crit item. It's kind of counterintuitive because the costs are low and the stats are relatively low, but as it doesn't really benefit the character as much as long as you don't have more crit items, so the passive is less situational and you can actually benefit from it on a regular basis, the item kind of doesn't make sense in itself. Or in other words, to sum it up, you have a crit item that should be very good early on, but is actually only good late because you need other crit items for it to be good. This is not very helpful because late game gold is usually not an issue, and you just can opt for the more expensive ones like Malice instead that give you more damage, and less for the utility option. So that together just makes it a little weird and puts it in an awkward spot. Why should I buy a strange utility item over very high damage late game? Especially when late game I want to usually try and target multiple targets in quick succession and not trade 1v1. For 1v1 trades, this is still the best item because you basically nerf your enemy below your own power by proccing it on him. But if you get attacked by 2 targets, which will often happen late game, that doesn't really help you. And if your goal is to dish out as much damage as possible, it doesn't help you either. That being said, it is not complete trash. Poison Star can work in triple crit builds, or it can work in such a way as Ataraxia tried to make it work in the SPL, which is by building Rage first to get those guaranteed frequent crits, and then go straight into Poison Star. If that makes sense is arguable simply because you are building 2 relatively low value crit items, but it will at least ensure that you frequently proc the passive and make good use of it. Also, the fact that still remains is that certain hunters just make more use of it. If you have Ram, you have that extreme slow in combination with your own slow. If you have one of the hunters that have built in crit, you have a much higher chance of proccing it earlier on, making it better for trades. So overall, it's not terrible, and even on Assassins it can have that niche slot. But with the price increase and the lower duration, I don't see the purpose on Assassins all too much anymore either, simply because you get decent enough power out of the tier 2 Deathbringer already, and you might as well save up for the Deathbringer in that case and deal a lot more damage than having a very short slow and a very short damage reduction against the enemy target. Even in other game modes, the same problem still applies. Many people have considered this for duel, but in duel, you often need a movement speed item like boots, you need a penetration item, you often need a lifesteal item and a defense item, and with that, your options for Poison Star are already really limited, especially when crit can be easily counterbuilt in duel. So even there, the niche is very small, simply because it's so dependent on other crit items at this point, because of that very short duration of the passive. I think we will still see Poison Star in the future, even if it's just as a niche pickup against certain targets, if you have a strong issue with one character on the enemy team dealing a lot of damage or something like that, and because the slow is still nice, but overall it's not going to be nearly as good as it was thought to be, and we might see other items rise instead. With the next patch, as funny as this may sound for you so far, Witchblade is actually getting a pretty solid buff that might potentially make it a viable choice on hunters if you're specifically looking to counter the damage that the enemy hunter is doing to you, which is basically, or in essence, what Poison Star does as well. And Witchblade has some other qualities that might actually give it the upper hand. We'll see about that, just throwing that out there for now. With that, I hope this clears up the confusion that was created about Poison Star by me and announcing that it will be very strong early, and the changes that happened to the item in the last second, basically. Thank you guys for watching. I make new videos pretty much every day, so feel free to subscribe if you haven't. Duke Sloth, out.